We can start. More or less on time. And it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our keynote lecture by Professor Przemysław Czapliński from Adam Mickiewicz University. He is a Polish studies scholar and of renown, and very much a public intellectual. And I think there is not a single public debate in Poland now which either has not been launched by Professor Czapliński or has not been inspired by his writings. So it's both in the academic sphere and public that is very prominent. I will mention a few of his books in brief. For example, in 2009, Recycling Poland, or in 2015, translation from a book from 2011, The Remnants of Modernity. And the recent one from 2016, which reads like the best fiction ever, is something, actually, it hasn't been yet translated. That's why, there are three or more translation options. I was thinking the moved map, moved as moved, can be shifted can be confused, or can be disturbed.
Shifted.
I
prefer shifted map, yeah.
And the recent debates that Professor Czapliński has launched, or inspired, as I said, would be also quite telling. For example, Divine Narrations, talking about belief, religion, and gods with writers in Poznan, or Bioclasses, Segregations and Alliances. Or, for example,
something else?
Oh yeah, I think I'll finish with this because it gets very complicated to translate it also. Przemysław, you can start and we'll listen.
Thank you very much. I congratulate the organizers of having organized this very interesting conference. Small yet fruitful, attractive, or maybe attractive and fruitful because small. And I'm grateful for your invitation. My lecture is on the origins of post-Enlightenment nations. At the end of 1989, in the midst of global and evolving discussion over Francis Fukuyama's essay, The End of History, there appeared another text, much shorter, written by young novelist Michael Ventura, which had a brilliant title, The Age of Endorkment. It was published in a periodical with not very modest title, Whole Earth Review. But it was in 1989, The Age of Endorkment. Ventura didn't intend to name the new period in our history. His main goal was to analyze the process of initiation into the adulthood in 20th century. According to the author, our ancestors satisfied the craving for dark energy while meeting the need for cosmology and knowledge. And we call that initiation. So the author assumes that in each of us there is a dark energy and, moreover, the craving for dark energy. Our culture, he writes, our culture denies the craving. We can't possibly meet the need. So most of us never truly grow up, never truly feel in our hearts adult. Because of that, the period of adolescence is longer and never stops, never turns into adulthood. People live in an age of endowment. I quote, please listen to his style. The world is afluid with dark psychic fluid. Everything's stained with it. We say we hate this stuff, but we don't act that way. We splash in it. Would we, if there weren't an irresistible collective need for endarkment? Such a profound mass phenomenon is far beyond right or wrong, good or evil, justice or injustice, and far, far beyond any political remedy. It's going to take a while to work itself out, a century or two. As it was said, the title of Ventura's essay was not a proposition of new periodization, but it meets my needs to find a different name for different times. The new era we live in is not a child of dark forces, but a result of inability to deal with dark feelings, the result of the denial that such powers exist. It didn't start after the victory of Donald Trump, Jarosław Kaczyński, or Viktor Orban, or after Alternative für Deutschland entered the German parliament as a third political party. After 1989, there was a strange agreement, a consensus, that a man is mostly rational and a society is mostly economical, or even more. If a man is rational, then, according to what Margaret Thatcher said, there is no such thing as society. La société n'existe plus. A rational man takes care of his, her family, of the work, property, but knows nothing and doesn't care about the distant strangers, inhabitants of other cities or shires. This consensus created the basis for a vast transformation that was supposed to close the 1980s revolution. In 1989, we were dealing with a revolution. It is, for me, undoubtedly. Private ownership was incorporated into the Constitution. The ownership of the means of production changed, and the means of production changed. However, the true task of this revolution was to reconcile modern ideals with capitalism. So, the real goal was to establish the freedom, equality, and solidarity in the free market world. I think that this revolution has failed. The most violent manifestation of this defeat has been the privatization of freedom. The citizen has the right to freedom of opinion, religion, or sexuality, but increasingly, he or she is responsible for working out conditions for the enjoyment of freedom. Year by year, the functions of the state were passed on to the shoulders of the individual. State education and healthcare, state pensions and communications continued to exist, but access to them was becoming increasingly limited. Transformation rhetoric has served to persuade citizens to start their own care for their own future. So take your child to a private school, buy a health insurance policy and medical package at a private company, retire at a private retirement bank, buy a car, because there will be no more local trains in your region. Postmodernism in Central Eastern Europe meant modernism without a mission, and modernity without mission meant freedom for the stronger, more independent, with economic, social, or cultural capital. People who had insufficient capital had been deprived of any help. It hit first and foremost the working class, the large-scale proletariat, and the farmers. It was irrational for social and economic reasons. Let's start with economic reasons. The logic of the market was supposed to eliminate big factories, heavy industry, and state-owned farms. However, after a few years, it was clear that neoliberal logic was not logic. Rafał Woś, in a very important book, It is No Country for Employees, published this year, wrote, in 1989, 3.2 million Poles worked in large factories. Large factory, it's a factory employing more than 1,000 people. Today, it's about 600,000. Is it wrong? He asked. Not the best. In most highly developed countries, the share of large industrial enterprises is about 1/3. We are barely 20%. This has far-reaching consequences, for example, for innovation, which is created in a large industry or for its needs. The end of quotation. The decline in employment in large enterprises has led to the diminishing of innovation needed for the economy, but the consequences turned out to be more extensive. The change of employment structure has been deprived of protection by trade unions. This led to another decline. The share of wages in gross domestic products in Poland decreased between 1995 and 2014 by 11%. Not increased, but decreased. Even more paradoxical was the new trade regulations. They set up a small local trade in a worse bargaining position against large companies with foreign capital. As a result, the class of small owners fell down. One should remember that they formed a pre-capitalist or proto-capitalist group in the 80s, using their own capital and own employees to introduce free market rules. Similarly, farmers should be considered as capitalists avant la lettre. Minor, yet respecting, indicates the economic account, not the planned economy. And yet, the new rules after 1989 introduced a system of preferences that condemned them to failure. As a result, in the years 1991, so I mentioned only 2 years, the price of the product produced by the farmers was reduced by 63%, and real farm income fell 40%. This means that history of democracy and capitalism after 1989 has marginalized two social groups that have contributed to the arrival of democracy and capitalism. The first was the large industrial proletariat, which was the most powerful force for resistance against communist government. If not for worker strikes and demonstrations, the political opposition wouldn't be able to force the Communist Party to talk at the round table. The second group was farmers and small trade representatives who were the foothold of capitalism in the days of socialism. The history of capitalism in Poland is primarily a history of social fear. Social fear results from fear of loss of employment, housing, creditworthiness, from fear of poor access to healthcare, lack of retirement, or too low pensions. This fear appeared in Poland on a mass scale. In 1993, there were 3 million unemployed. In 2004, almost 4 million. The mass of social anxiety stemmed primarily from the withdrawal of the state from mediating functions between the citizen and the market. This is where we come across the first cause of the nation's appearance in late modernity. This reason is abdication of the state from the protective function. The nation appeared as a response to the state's weak interventions in economic relations. Maybe we should omit the word nation, and instead we should use the word majority. The creation of nation was, as a matter of fact, the creation of the only effective group which can affect the politics. It seems obvious why the social classes and their representations, the trade unions, didn't demand it. The answer is that the victory of neoliberal transformation required the dismantling of all collective entities, such as the social class or the nation. At this point, we find ourselves in an embarrassing intersection of leftist aspirations for emancipatory and neoliberal deregulation. The state was not involved in the caring role, but was heavily engaged in identity politics. It was a policy focused primarily on the other. There was a clear correlation between the lack of caring from the state and the identity politics. Support for social differentiation was helpful in the dismantling of collective entities, such as the social class or the nation. And dismantling was also a condition of economic transformation. It is the transition from the social state or socialistic welfare state to the neoliberal state. This policy was aimed at transforming collective entities into a group of individual subjects, in separate individuals producing and consuming. How did that disassembly happen? The troublesome economic data in my paper was needed not only to illustrate the size of the changes, they were also important to realize that the transformation was supported by expert rhetoric, which required the society to submit to change. In other words, the greatest emotive force of transformation in Poland was not hope, it was shame. Shame for lack of self-independence, shame for being far behind Western Europe. The embarrassed should have thought that they themselves are guilty. If they are unemployed, it is because they know little. If they have a poorly paid job, it is because they are not worth much. If they lose their apartment, it's because they deserve it. Shame as the motor power of late modernity has been effective for a while. Shame is a spatial social effect operating under two conditions. First, the one who shames must be faultless. Second, one who is embarrassed must receive a reward for improving. This affective mechanism couldn't work because the real purpose of shaming was to persuade people to be self-sufficient, to give up searching for help in a social group or in a state institutions. So, we had two powerful mechanisms that work for the benefit of late capitalism. The first was the economic dismantling of collective entities. The second was the embarrassment of all collective actions. After the dismantling of social classes and the delegitimization of collective demands, there should appear a society composed of individuals who do not expect assistance from the state and who do not expect respect from the community. So, the individual was exposed to the second anxiety. Let us call that identity anxiety. It appears where individual fears that his or her former affiliation to a collective entity, such as social class, religious community, or nation, is not a basis for respect. And that, of course, produced a certain social void. The solution of binding problems, the strongest yet paradoxical glue, the substance to fill the social void, was to be a middle class, which never appeared on a large scale, so as the European identity. So we can say that what we deal with is crisis of announced identities of middle class and European membership. Here is the other reason for the appearance of the nation. First, let me remind you, it consisted in the fact that after the dismantling of social classes and trade unions, the nation was the only majority capable of demanding a change in economic policy, demanding the restoration of state care functions. The second reason is respect. The disassembly of social classes was supposed to make Homo Sovieticus turn into Homo economicus. The basis for respect in social life has become the achievement of economic success. Only someone who has achieved success can count on respect. Who didn't want another life, who didn't want to succeed or was not able to succeed, could count on respect only within an old collective subject. The result of the policy of individualization of society turned out to be counterintuitive. Instead of individualization, there reappeared a collective entity called a nation. The nation bestows a respect on all who are included in the nation. After 1989, the society lived in the economy of inflation of shame. After the change of power in 2015, the society lives under inflation of pride. Social anxiety and shame do not go directly into pride. Both of these affects are subject to spatial transformation. Shame should be relieved by love or acceptance. Anxiety should find solace in the sense of security. Meanwhile, today's affective policy pushes both emotions to anger, immediately to anger. Its immediate conversion into an emotion that needs retaliation. Social anxiety culminates in anti-liberal, anti-elitist, anti-establishment anger. Shame, on the other hand, led to the appearance of a nation full of resentment. This nation looks for retaliation and for strangers. Retaliation falls on actors who have played a central role in identity politics in the 90s. Revenge reaches primarily a woman, a Jew, a homosexual, a Muslim. They were the model other, the weaker of modern history. They were persecuted, discriminated. They were an example of an evil that is nestled in the normative community. The biographies of discriminated women, Jews, and homosexuals were meant up to put shame for the violence against the weaker. The renunciation of violence against the other was to become the cornerstone of late modernity. As we know, this coincided with the neoliberal dismantling of collective subjects. Therefore, today's nation, instead of defending itself against capitalism, defends its own cohesion. And it attacks another, the Jew, female, homosexual, Muslim. The nation is constituted primarily as a collective entity based on the primacy of identity, uniformity. In this uniformity, the nation perceives, first, guarantee of equality. In the light of national identity, all are equal or alien. So, I think that nationalism is a language of democracy nowadays. Second, it is a guarantee of respect. The members of the nation offer themselves the respect of a kind they had been previously denied. So, the nationalism fills the social void and it makes social bondage. Third, the uniformity of the nation is a kind of security guarantee. Members of the nation create a strong community, and the measure of its strength is the constant threat of strangers, that is, attacking the woman, the Jew, the homosexual, and of course, the Muslim. So the nation appeared at the turn of the 20th and 21st century as a result of growing inequalities. These inequalities have been naturalized, portrayed as the effect of human attitudes, not as the effects of the system. The naturalization of inequality required convincing that people were unable or unwilling to adapt to new circumstances. Put simply, it required constant shame, and no one could live in constant shame. This, in turn, has led to the polarization of society, increasingly clear division into people accepting the free market and those who demanded other methods of reconciling capitalism with democracy. From the inequality, the road therefore led to polarization, from polarization to cultural warfare. As a result, on the political scene, the nation emerged as a majority, defending itself against dangers, economic degradation, cultural invasion, and terrorist threats. Nation which we see now is a nation, a state in a state of a siege. Yes, siege? Siege. Okay, thank you. Shame. Okay. Shame to the weaker and the renunciation of violence against the other was to become the cornerstone of late modernity. Shame on weakness becomes the foundation of the new stage. As Jarosław Kaczyński said, one should be hard, tough. Yes, one should be tough, not weak. Having what? Yeah. It's a common saying. Yeah. Of course, one can answer from the basing on the film $1 Million Baby. Tough ain't enough. Yeah, but they are not so smart. So this is a process of reinstallation of violence in the social life, kind of legitimization of violence in the social life. Having said all this, I'd like to add 2 short notes. First of all, nationalism is a form of searching for stability or safety in global circumstances. But it is an ineffective form. This is demonstrated by the concessions of nationalist governments in Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia. For instance, signing off the CETA, Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, the lack of change in the tax system, the removal of the privileges of the teachers' charter in Poland, the lack of support for the trade union movement, all demonstrate that the continuation of the history of nationalism in Central and Eastern Europe can lead to fascism. That is, to exacerbate the cultural war as compensation for the loss in the economic field. The above concern leads to the second remark. I think that what is happening now in Central and Eastern Europe is a prelude to history in Western Europe and in the United States. For much of modernity, until the end of the 20th century, the core states were a pattern that should be imitated by semi-peripheral or peripheral states. In this sense, the center of Europe announced the future history of areas outside the core. Meanwhile, since the fall of communism, this relationship has been reversed. If we are compiling recent problems in Central and Eastern Europe with current problems in Western Europe, it will be found that Central Europe was a globalization laboratory that prefigured the future fate of Western states. The German historian Philipp Thaer, in the book New Deal on the Old Continent, published recently, asks the question, will South Europe become a new East? And he gave numerous arguments for this. The deregulation of labor laws has appeared 2 decades before the forthcoming of famous book by Guy Standing, The Precariat. The mass of precariat in the first decade of the 21st century was the norm in Poland. Transformation of lots of companies according to Uber's rules. So to Uber's rules was long before Uber. Central and Eastern Europe was also the first to experience the dominance of corporations over the state. Poland and other countries granted tax privileges to foreign companies, thereby reducing the capital inflow to pension and insurance funds. So I think that we are in a trap. Nation is the only system defending the society from the globalization, but this system protects from unreal, hallucinatory, fictive cultural threats rather than from economic ones. But thanks to this, we can see the future in our doorstep. In a sense, the process of uniting the two parts of Europe should go to the second stage. This time, however, not under the slogans of the Union, a common Greek-Christian tradition, but above all with the slogans of the reform of capitalism. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. And before I open the floor, just one little remark. I forgot introducing Professor Czaplinski to mention the most important recent debate that he's taken part in and launched, which is on the social effects, as we heard, and the failure, perhaps, of elaborating, developing a binding narrative. Kind of. So I think this presentation reflects those recent debates circulating. Okay, and now questions, please. We're free to have some more time, I guess, because the next session is going to be short. Okay, so taking questions. Okay, Professor Emery.
Well, I enjoyed your talk very much, and as a complete outsider living in Western Europe, there are a few things that I don't really get. Let me establish that the Polish GNP between 1989 and 2016 grew 50% quicker than the average EU GDP. That is a marvelous achievement, first of all. Secondly, you mentioned the lack of large enterprises in Polish
The lack of
large enterprises.
Okay.
Well, this might be good for Poland. It might be that the Polish economy doesn't support large enterprises and that you've made this tremendous growth rate by having smaller enterprises. I don't see any problem there. You also mentioned the decline of the share of wages in the GDP. Good for Poland. It might be that the Polish economy is now paying more for investments, more for, industrialization. I mean, in an economy without any investment, you have 100% wage growth in the GDP. That's a society we don't want to return to. You mentioned the declining share of farming in the GDP of Poland. That is something that's happened in every industrial nation. We've grown wealthy by doing other things. I don't see why this should be a problem for Poland. If all these matters, of course, constitute transitional problems. I realize that. But in the end, there is more economic growth than ever before. And that, of course, goes also for the unemployment. I do understand that one of the problems of the collective economy is the fact that you have full employment, but a very low labor productivity. If you have higher labor productivity, some people are unemployed, and that can go up and down. So I realize it's again a transitional problem, and it's not nice when people are unemployed, but in general, it's nothing to be worried about. So if you have all these success stories, why is there so much discontent in Poland?
Well, I think you should ask people on the street. People on the street, why did they vote for? Yeah. So maybe the short answer on all your questions. Maybe we should start from the simple statement. You are right. So what? You are right. So what? Maybe even more. This kind of speech. Hey, people, what are you doing? Yeah, the economy is in the process of growing. All the data are increasing. So what's?
But this is for me.
Yeah. So, well, but the social life is not a matter of facts. It's a matter of affects.
But have people ever imagined what would have happened if the old economy had continued? Is that something that is being discussed in Poland, or that's not an option?
I don't know.
You have to make a choice between one or the other.
we have to make a choice between what and what.
Well, a capitalist development or a collective development. You had, I think, experience of 40 years of collective development.
Well, I think that
didn't seem to be so good either.
I think that these political choices are voting for something like both. Well, of course, people are trying to make a balance between their hopes and dark visions. So they make some kind of trade, more safety instead of freedom. Yeah, more safety. Well, whereas the state, the government, gives them security instead of safety. Yeah, that's a switch which leads to the fascist future.
And now Professor Groch and then Tamara.
I enjoyed your talk very much, and it confirms many things I already said here. I would like to support your argument. I think your central argument is, in my opinion, that this new or nationalism, I would call it in a different way, is generally a result of a crisis of identities. The crisis of identities. This is the result of it.
Yeah.
I would like to support your argument through history, not only in my eyes, but several other authors who mean the same. European nations in the end of 18th century and are started in a situation of crisis of identities, where this old regime, ancient regime, was falling down and so on, and they tried to find something new, and this was the nation lived its way. But the difference, I think, is, and maybe you could agree or not agree, is that in that time, this original forming of nations were joined with, what I said yesterday, with the idea or with the reality, practically, of an abstract community of values. It was a value to have a culture and to build up the culture and so on. This is, I'm afraid, today not the case. And this is a rather dangerous difference from this classical time of nations. And I think maybe you really overemphasize the role of economy. Maybe this economic decline or difficulties are more subjective than objective. And also this is important, of course. And so this was my center, and I totally agree with you, and I found more arguments also for me in your talk. And but only maybe a small remark to this economical thing. I would add one more thing. It is not a matter of great or small factory, but it's a matter of, and now I don't know the situation in Poland, but I'm sure it's the same like in the Czech Republic. These factories, new factories are growing. Not important if 100 or 300 people there, but this all is are factories based on importing something from Germany or Holland and putting together and exporting it back. It is, I don't know the name in English, it's a montovna in Czech. This is something which strengthens the shame and the feeling of being something lower. And being marginalized. We are only good for these things and nothing more. And this again strengthens this danger, or not important if danger or not, the possibility of a strong nationalism. Trying somewhere to find self-consciousness. It is maybe the case, much stronger the case in Poland than in Czech Republic. In Czech Republic it's not the case, but I think it would be fine if it would be in Czech Republic also the case.
Thank you very much. I agree with what you said about crisis of identity, but I'd like to say something more about the economy. Maybe you are right that I overemphasized the economy, but I think that after the end of history and after the fall of great narratives, this that is, the economy, year by year, turned out to be the new great narrative. Yeah? So it is not so important, the strict data, because when it comes to the strict data, of course, the economist could argue and defeat the vulgar people. Yeah, we don't know what does it mean, this percentage and this and that one. But people, we can look at this whole history, 2 decades, like a laboratory of social grouping. People were trying to find a group or a collective, an identity, effective in political life. So first, for instance, they joined the trade union. It didn't work. It completely didn't work. So they created another trade union, another political party, and so on and so on. Suddenly, or not suddenly, we have a nation as a majority which works. Yes, this is the only force on the political stage that can legally threaten to all, to the government and to the rest of the society. And the nation uses all the economic data. So this is kind of great narrative. We are getting poor. So, yeah, we are getting poor. Help us, or we will withdraw our votes. So the role of economy. So it seems to me sometimes I feel like we are in the midst of postmodernism. So everything could be created. A nation is not a real state of social bondage. It's not based on real history. It's all faked. Moreover, we can see several books, very important ones. For instance, Jarosław Marek Rymkiewicz has published the so-called Sarmatian trilogy, Wieszanie, Samuel Zborowski, Rejtan. So he showed in his books this very moment of self-creation, the moment when the people, different to each other or stranger to each other, suddenly creates the nation. So we can see that it should be a trauma moment. It should be a dangerous moment, for instance, of uprisal or a state of war or something else. But at this very moment, people creates the nation. So there is no need for long history. There is no need for real data. All we need is a moment of social theater. Yes? So that is why the economy is on the 2nd or 3rd stage. Yes? But it could be in every moment. It could be reached for, to give some examples, to give some proofs. Okay.
Okay, now Tamara and later Helge. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the lecture. I have a few remarks, or I will try to be brief. First, you said that the neoliberalism dismantled collective entities, class. I would like to stick to the class. I don't think it dismantled it. Well, I agree about the individualization and everything. Maybe it's just the class consciousness or that the neoliberal doxa has been established, what Pierre Bourdieu says, terms a misrecognition in a way. Second, you said that the nation should defend itself from capitalism. If we substitute nation for society, I would say that society should defend itself from capitalism in a way that Karl Polanyi in The Great Transformation wrote, something like that. Also, the cultural warfare, what do you mean? Maybe if you can provide example of cultural warfare. I very much enjoyed your analysis of shame and success. I would like to maybe sometimes read and use it in some of my papers. And I would like to say about connecting shame and factories. People who work in Serbian factories, they today they wear diapers, pampers, diapers, and their toilets are locked, so they could be more productive. So that's sometimes shame is not only identity shame; it's really physical shame.
Yeah. Well.
Sorry for so much, but you can choose one.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'd like to agree with you, but when we talk about class consciousness instead of class, social class, it wouldn't be so real and so dangerous, like the history in Poland, for instance. Yes. Over almost 4 million people were employed in big factories, and it was a process of 3 or 4 years when they found themselves out of job. Yes, so it wasn't only a dismantling of social consciousness, social class consciousness. It was also a real process of dismantling the social class. It's a kind of bad or dark miracle. Well, it occurred to me few years after 1989. Suddenly, I realized that the cultural representations of the workers and the farmers has vanished, disappeared from the cinema, from theater, from literature. It was no more farmers or workers. Of course, there were lots of farmers and workers which were transforming themselves into middle class. Yeah, but it wasn't the same. So I think that this is the process to be depicted, portrayed, analyzed, and characterized as dismantling of social class. Because what we need now is also a social class language and social class terms. Without this, we are blind to some social process. And thank you very much for reminding me Karl Polanyi, who is absolutely very important. And this term misrecognition also could be useful. Thank you. Thank you.
And now Helge Wendt.
There's some subjects that we already discussed. My question is on focusing more on this apparently or not anonymous processes going on, the kind of nation formation. Is this an anonymous process, or isn't it rather a process initiated by some persons creating kind of energy that is should focus on this subject that has for goal the creation of a national discourse? And I'm asking this because this might be when you try to elaborate a kind of narrative that analyzing this process and criticizing, this might open or give you the possibility to become more concrete on several terms than this kind of movement might represent itself. And one of the problems that I see with any kind of those present national movements is that there are a lot of people hiding behind the facade of majority talk, saying we are representing we are only representing a movement that is going on anyway. And I'm not certain. I think you could turn it the other way around. You can name persons creating a movement. There's no movement creating persons.
Well, I think that both processes are going on, both. That is, there are some individuals heralding the creation of a nation, and there are groups, larger and larger groups, with their narratives, films, musics, rhymes, sketches, drawings, and so on and so on, articulating hatred and pride. Yes, so they are trading the energy. Yes, so from the individuals to the groups, and from groups to the individuals. I said in one part of my speech that we can shift, we can change the name nation into majority, because it was the process. But now you cannot choose any other majority, for instance, all workers of the world, yes? You cannot choose we, the weaker of the state. No. This is the time of a nation. This is the time of a nation. You cannot change this majority, which was named as a nation, into another one. So this is not that moment. If you put enough energy, every greed of your energy and of your spirit, if you put the exact narrative, you could do it in several years, in one decade, but not now. Now, the main majority, and the only majority which has enough power to take part, to participate in the history, is a nation. Whereas it is, of course, a created one, a created nation, yes? I don't know whether I met your question. Yeah?
And now, Agnieszka Sadecka.
I really liked the talk, and I fully agree with your statements. And I kept thinking about this reportage by Jacek Hugowada and Skucha, in which the reporter is interviewing his former colleagues from the opposition. So one of the oppositionists who is sort of marginalized, unemployed, and so on, tells how he constantly fights either with the state or with the institutions or with his neighbors or with his ex-wife. So I was thinking about this sort of addiction to conflict, to struggle, which gives a sort of subjectivity perhaps, or a feeling of mission that is what you also mentioned. I don't know if you would agree.
It is a problem. Maybe according to Ventura's essay, yes, there is a kind of dark energy and a craving for dark energy deep inside each of us, maybe. But maybe it was a historical process, and year by year, it seemed that agreement led nowhere. Yes, there is a Polish saying, zgoda buduje, niezgoda rujnuje. So the union creates disharmony. What?
Destroys.
Destroys, yeah? I think that people it revealed to them that destroyal or conflict is more effective in the political life than agreement. So they turned it upside down. Niezgoda buduje, yes? So the conflict builds, the conflict creates, only by conflict, because it's more or less about this first decade in Poland, which was based on the agreement that people are rational. Maybe we are not rational, or maybe we are rational, and according to rationality, we use power of dark energy when it is needed, yes, when everything else failed. And I think that the language of nationalism, all those bullshits, the language of nationalism is the end of hundreds of trials. Yeah, people were talking, shouting. Yes, they were begging, do something. Yes, do something. We have no money, no apartments, no job, no respect. So do something. Yes, and the neoliberals kept saying, well, you know, buddy, it's all about you are useless. You are useless. Well, learn language, learn how to use the computer, go to Europe, for instance. Yes, go to Europe. Well, let me remind you one of the most cruel answer of Adam Michnik. Yes, well, this is a person. Yeah? This is a person. When he heard a question from a journalist, I don't remember, what do you advise to the inhabitants of small town 100 kilometers from the Warsaw? Well, said Adam Michnik, let them, they should enter the cars and come to Warsaw. Yes, so that is the measure of blindness. Yes, so year by year, all terms, all questions were, so to say, diminished, dismantled, and at the end of this process, the nationalism is the only language in which the majority, the society, can speak with the government. That's the present moment. Of course, the real victim of this process, the first victim of this process, are minorities. Yes? Intelligentsia, previous elites, women, homosexuals, Jews, Muslims, and so on and so on. But the second victim is going to be the nation. And I think that it's going to be, if nothing changes, it's going to be another period of fascism.
Okay, so we have two more people, but I would like to give myself the right to ask a brief question too. I'm interested in your project of forecasting the present, which is kind of a visionary project, obviously. So, okay, if let's say the situation of narrative is likely to proceed in this way, this is the time of the nation. Nation is the only category that works for all. And but obviously, what we at the same time, what we are observing now is the process of the politics of excluding some national subjects from the national community, and these are the EU grant recipients, right? The establishment, the elites, the intellectuals, and so on. And well, more or less explicitly mentioned minorities. Yeah. Kind of tacitly excluded, sort of. And but what if we think of a slight detour in this narrative? Maybe there is a force that should be taken into consideration. You mentioned, okay, there is no more any international working class kind of community that we can think about. But there is a huge, I don't know if class, a huge gathering of, let's say, mobile labor. And these are the new cosmopolitans. Not the kind of classical privileged, let's say, mentioned yesterday by Professor Eriksson, those who travel and get frequent flyer points and so on, like intellectuals, for example, like academics, but also huge masses of people who travel, who are mobile as labor force, yeah, in the world scale. It's a global force. Would you think this narrative may change? Because another thing that links up with your forecasting is actually what we have in cyberpunk novel, yeah? Absolute global corporatization, the disappearance of any community and state force. We only have, like in William Gibson and so on, yeah? We only have huge corporations that are actually highly militarized, and this is this vision of technology as serving the corporate life, and all the people are just as if enslaved. Yeah. So this kind of these two as if paths of possibility. What do you think? And then Bogdan and Sabina. Please.
Well, I'd like to agree with you, but I can't.
No, because I'm not saying that this
of course.
is going to.
We are talking about narrative. I don't see any, not only any new narrative emerging from the life of this global. It's not a class. It's not a class. We are not creating a class, a social class, a global social class. We are cząstki elementarne. Yeah? We are cellules élémentaires. That's what we are. Yeah, and that's the ground of our self-sufficiency. Yeah? So I don't see not only the new narrative emerging from the life of this social, of this class or group, but I don't see any hope for new narrative. But of course, literature is unpredictable. So.
But they do write about themselves, so there are narratives actually.
Yeah, of course, but it's not. It's not a solution for all those problems. We belong to a certain social group which can survive. Yeah, it could be our anthem. I can survive. Yes, because well, look where are we now? Yeah, look where are we now? It's a hotel. Yeah, 3 or 4 star hotel. Yes, it's a nice apartment, nice room we are drinking, sipping our water. There are lots of beautiful pictures and photographs on the walls, and so on and so on. This is our world. Yeah, and we can change because of our cultural capital. We can change this place for another. We can more or less, we can work here or in another city or in another country. We can quickly learn foreign languages, yes? So we are, so to say, to some extent, we are free from the constraints of this world, yeah? It is not the situation of the majority. It is not. So if we are looking for new narrative, we should look for the narrative for the majority, and then it could be an alternative for the national version of the present and future history. Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah.
Okay, now a brief gloss from Tamara.
Yeah,
And
really just a short anecdote. Exactly what you were saying. I was very satisfied yesterday at the conference, and I went back to my room and in a hotel which is very fancy and very nice, and I turned on the TV and there was a movie by Ken Loach, Daniel Blake, and I just had to go to sleep because I was broken.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
exactly those contrasts.
Yeah. Yeah. What is more, it seems to me, I'm not sure, but it seems to me that this is also a shift, a kind of shift from jakiś pośredni?
intermediary?
Transition? From intermediary democracy to direct democracy. Direct democracy.
Representative.
Mediated from mediated democracy to direct democracy. Direct democracy, it's based on manifestations, on constant voting. Yes, government is permanently provoking the society to take part in some manifestations and voting, and the highest and the final version of direct democracy is state of exception, and this is the direction of our state, a state of exception that is both democratic and totalitarian. Yes, what is most dangerous in direct democracy? It's a kind of political agreement for touching another person, touching the stranger. Yes, so you can touch the body of a stranger, and that is why our government and the members of our parliament do not commend any fights on the street in which the nationalists attack the strangers. Our politicians, the members of our parliament, do not comment, yes? Even when people are attacking someone, an innocent victim, they are attacking someone in the name of Jesus Christ, yes? And the Catholic Church in Poland and the parliament and the government, they say nothing, yes? It's a kind of privilege, a kind of allowance, yes? You can touch another person, you can hit him, you can grab him, yeah? That's a transition or transformation from the highest level of policy to the lowest level of social life. You can enter the social life and you can manifest your will to power. Beat him, beat someone. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, well, how could you explain the situation in which an ordinary man attacks a German, a professor who came to Warsaw and speaks?
No, he was actually
Polish-speaking German.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Like
they were.
German.
Yeah, so a professor from Poland and a professor from Germany. They were speaking in Germany, and someone in this bus or tram attacked the German or the Pole and hit him.
On the head.
Hit him. Yeah. Well, and
12 stitches.
one of the member of the governing political party said, well, one can ask why we have to wait so long for that. Yeah, so which means, well, Polish society was suffering for enough period. Now it's time to act. And that is, yes, that is the basis of direct democracy. It's a kind of acting which, of course, is not reasonable and effective acting. It's a substitutive acting, yes? Acts for nothing. Okay.
Bogdan and Sabina, and then we'll just finish. Siegfried, what do you suggest? Do you have coffee break after the discussion before the last lecture? My suggestion is that we have a break after those two brief, please, questions. Okay.
You rather be brief.
You can not be brief.
Select, because I have so many questions. You've done a wonderful work presenting the ethos of the speaker, and you yourself, you did a wonderful work by convincing us with your pathos. Now it's the logos that I need to question a bit. I'm not sure. You were talking about the dissolution of collective identities, right? It looks like class identity is something real. National identity is not, is bullshit. How come? Why would we operate with this kind of distinction? Okay, that's one question. Secondly, the nation is the only way in which you can press the government for change, for optimizing the situation. The Romanian example seems to be telling you otherwise. In Romania, there was a series of, Sabina was talking the other day, there were a series of street demonstrations that pressed the government even to step down, right? The Prime Minister stepped down. Because of the demonstrators, and the demonstrator was not there in the name of a class, social class. They were not there in the name of a nation. They were simply spontaneously united by one issue, right? Whether it was the faulty way, the corrupt way in which buildings were, licensed by, or restaurants, bars, or clubs were licensed by the government, or it was an ecological disaster, or in these days it was the government trying to change the law to allow corruption.
Yeah, to legitimize the corruption.
Right? So these are not nationalistic issues, and these are not class issues, and yet still there is a sense of solidarity, because solidarity is there.
Absolutely.
The dissolution of solidarity seems to be something you were talking about. Yeah? Sometimes you used to have solidarity, although there are critics that are saying that was fake, that was false solidarity. That was ideological solidarity. And as soon as the regime collapsed, everything else disappeared, right? And, possibly among the explanations or the elements needed to describe the situation, could it be
that you have a breach of culture. Moving from one culture to another in a fragmentation, a historical fragmentation that is not typical of other nations, of other states, of other histories, national histories, right? Here you have this fragmentation, communism, a breach, a historical breach. Yeah, fall of communism, another historical breach. And you're not able to replace in time, yeah, and create a cultural tradition or a cultural continuity. So that people, for instance, there's a difference between the expectations that you have once communism falls and the achievements, right? Or the growth is not quick enough. Perhaps they're not prepared for the notion of capitalist crisis, unemployment, something natural for a capitalist, not so natural for us, because in communism you don't have unemployment. That's perfect society.
Yeah, but not on such a scale. Yeah, I agree, but not on such a scale. It's a disaster. It's not a normal situation. Yeah, when one fourth of people able to work are unemployed. Okay.
Yeah. Well, stuff like that. So could cultural?
Yeah. It's very. Yeah.
What is the solution?
Oh, well, it's very interesting. Thank you very much. You asked about this relation between social class and nation. Social class was a real entity of social life, and nation, as I said, is a creation. Yes, nation is a function of a narrative or narratives. How does it come? So I think that the base of social class was dissoluted, dismantled. So there is no possibility of there is no possibility of fighting in the name of social class, because there is no such thing as large-scale workers. Yes, people who work should reorganize themselves and should create new identity, not on the with a small okay. I'm thinking about something quite else. So I will think about your question, social class and nation, the process of creation and the process of restoration, of recreation of a nation is something in which the narratives are first and the facts are the second. Yes? I don't know how, but that's how it happens here. Or not only here. Look at what Putin is making and doing. Yeah? Look at what Donald Trump is doing. Yes? This constant using of social media. Yes? This is creating a social bind and a social identity, new identity with new media. Okay, so maybe this is, I'm exhausted, sorry. I can't find the exact words, so please forgive me. So maybe it could be the end of our discussion.
And we can continue during the coffee
Okay, yeah,
break.
we can continue with the small help of coffee. Thank you.